Hey there. So, have you ever listened to music and thought, how did the composer not use any words and make me feel a certain way? Have you ever listened to music and thought to yourself, I really don't understand what people get from a listening experience. I don't know what it's doing for them. Have you ever thought to yourself, oh, I like this part of the song, but I really don't understand what's going on here? If you have had any of these experiences, what I would like to do for you today is through looking at the soundtrack of Octopath Traveler by Yasunori Nishiki, I would like to explore how composers use musical tools and narrative ideas and storytelling to convey emotional meaning in instrumental music. So, if that sounds interesting to you, I would love for you to tag along. That being said, if you feel stuck on your device right now, if the call of YouTube is just pulling you too strong and you need to get something done or you need to just chill for a bit, I encourage you to take the next little bit of time to either take a break or do what you need to do. However, if you're here to have a random guy on the internet communicate how composers use narrative to communicate emotion in instrumental music, then buckle up, I guess, because we're going into it. So let's give it a shot. So to start, let me give you an idea of how this video is going to be set up. The first thing we'll do is we will listen to the song by itself. The next thing we will do is we will go through each section of that song and we will talk about how each section of the song communicates a different idea. So we'll start with just your first listen. You can develop your own thoughts on it. Then we'll go through a second time where we will talk about how each section communicates a different idea. And then before the third listen, the last listen, I will go over roughly what the game is about. So that way, with your first experience, with your understanding of some of the tools they're using, and then finally the narrative context of the game, hopefully by that third listen, you will be able to see how and why a composer could construct an instrumental song. So, without further ado, there's no better place to start than with the title theme of Octopath Traveler. Let's go. In this first section, you'll hear nervous excitement. There's a bubbling, uncertain, forward energy. And what the composer is doing to generate this, for anyone who knows music, they will already know this, but uh, there's a concept called the root. Now, I don't want to get too bogged down in music theory today, but I think some basics can be helpful in understanding just how our minds interpret music and why they do the things they do, rather than create some crazy analytical, hoity-toity scientific reasoning for stuff, right? We're just going to go off of what we observe. So, in music, we have what is commonly referred to as the root. So, if you've ever heard someone sing do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, do, do is going to be your root. What does that mean? Are you just saying that it's the root because it's where you started and it's where you ended? Well, here's a hint. There's a reason that it starts and ends on do. So, let me demonstrate. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. What do you want me to do? Do. Can you hear the tension? Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. What do you want to hear? Ba. Ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. That bum is the root. The reason that it is called the root is not because we want to just make things complicated. It, in its initial observations, was noted that when a song started in one place and we hear it go all over the place, that for some evolutionary biological reason, we want to hear it go back to where it started. That lets us know that the point is made. Every single song is going to be bringing up points to you. It's going to be telling you a story, and that could be as basic a story as saying, I bought a piece of pizza. That would be like, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. Even if it's an octave up, we call both of these do. It's just how the sound waves line up. So if you're like, wait, sound waves, what are you talking about? If they're evenly divided, our brain senses it as the same kind of frequency. So if we hear that, then that means the question has been answered. There's nothing else to worry about. We're good to go, right? So in this song, we immediately get a sense of this nervous excitement and bubbling forward energy. How is this happening? So if we go back to that's the root. Bum. Well, where is the melody? Bum 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 ba da 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 da. You're hearing da 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 da. It's like there's a sense of energy because it's not gone back to the root, right? It's just above it. So it gives a sense of expectation. You're like, okay, well, tell me where you're going. Well, as it continues to go, the bass is creating a sense of call to adventure, but the flute is feeling a bit of uncertainty. So even though there's this call to adventure, you get the sense that it's a little bit reserved. It's like, okay, I don't know yet. So we have our root and we have the sense of uncertainty. I don't know. Okay, here's our situation. We have a build-up adventure, and there's a need to go to adventure, but there's a little uncertainty, right? Now, they also use the flute because it has a whimsical and slightly innocent but like free sense to it, and that fits with the idea of an uncertain call to adventure, because a call to adventure means there's going to be danger, but there's also a sense of like beautiful freedom, right? So that is what is being elicited from the instrumental choices. In this next section, though, what we see is picture someone imagining, the far off lands that I'll see. Oh, maybe that problem that I've had, like maybe it will be resolved, right? There's a sense of this seeing of a beautiful possibility, urging them forward out of their uncertainty. which then leads to our next section. Going into this section, you have a sense of, okay, let's go. It's like, okay, let's go for it. Now, this is a courageous sound, but it is not unflappable. It is not completely sure of itself. So it's not that it's courageous because it's completely resolute, actually quite the opposite. What you get in this section from the trumpets is that it is going forward strongly towards that vision that it just saw, but it still has a little bit of uncertainty. And that is highlighted. This entire section is then heightened by the introduction of this whimsical Irish flute, which anytime that you hear this Irish flute, it tends to give the sense of this wild, chaotic, impermanent beauty. You could think like freedom of like a butterfly or just anything that's impermanent and free, right? You could think of even like wolves. Essentially free nature is what it gives you the sense of. It gives you a natural sense of impermanent beauty. Okay, now for this next section, what you'll notice is that as these elements are pouring forward, there's a proud marching or like sailing forward, and there's also this nervous hope for something miraculous. So have you guys ever had that sense where you think, like it's too good to be true, but some part of you are like, oh, but maybe it is possible, right? So it's like it's a vulnerable, childish, like almost naive hope. But man, and this is why I wanted to talk about this, because even talking about this, it's like it's a very emotional impact when you can see how these ideas are tied together. So there's this idea of like, oh, but maybe we can do it. Now, you might be wondering, okay, well, you talked a lot about all this stuff. You haven't talked about like the nitty gritty. And I don't want to get too much into the nitty gritty, because if you get in the weeds too much, it's not as helpful. However, there is a tool being used here, simple music theory idea that is absolutely at play in here. And it's the idea of the perfect fifth. So that sounded so condescending. It's the idea of the perfect fifth. Okay, the perfect fifth is the fifth note in a major scale. So it's in a lot of scales, but you have do, re, mi, fa, so, do. Anytime you hear that so, that's a perfect fifth. And that is telling you we're about to go back home. We're about to get there, right? So here's a question for you, okay? If we're about to go back home and everything in the song sounds wrong and dark, do you want to get home yet? No, right? If everything in the song, when that note is being played, is hopeful and triumphant, do you want it to end triumphant? Yes. And so when you're listening to a song, composers... The dog is barking. I'll be back. You're being a big baby. You're being a stinky. So when you hear the perfect fifth, it means it's about to end. And so what that means is it gives a sense of urgency. You're like, oh, we better get our stuff together. We're almost there, but we can't lose it yet. So it gives a sense of like holding on. And there's something like heroic and tragic and beautiful about using a perfect fifth, and it can add this tension that's really, really nice, regardless of whether it's a completely depressing song, whether it's super hopeful, whether it's mysterious, or it's more serene and sincere. All of those different kinds of music can use the perfect fifth to give a sense of we're about to go home. Now, depending on the story you're telling, that could be good or bad or mixed. You know, there's a wide array of complicated things that can conjure. So you have this holding on, this struggle, this like naive hope that you're like, you don't want to admit, but you're like, oh, come on, we're almost there. Well, by the time we've gotten to this part of the song, it's actually grown a lot. We've heard new instruments coming in. They're doing trills in the background, highlighting some of the emotional moments of this and showing maybe some of the characters that you'll meet along the way, showing how this is a powerful wave of this like committed person that is now starting to affect everyone around them, right? They're starting to grow their influence of those around them. by this section that comes right before the end of the song. We again return to this soaring but tragic and majestic vibe that I talked about with the flute, how there's a impermanent free beauty here that is being encapsulated. What's cool is that it's asked us a question like, oh, is it gonna go okay? Well, in the very end of this song, it does something incredible. It goes to this out of character, very resolute fanfare where it's like very sure of itself. And what it's doing is it's opened the book up a little bit for you, and now it's closing. And it's like, do you want to find out what happens? Look what's inside this game. They're like holding it up for you. It's like, check it out. If you want the answers, you're going to have to find it yourself. So this fanfare at the end's like, that's the adventure, and those are the answers that you're going to find on your way, right? Now, again, we still don't know what this game's about, right? But if you can understand some of the emotional narrative underpinnings of what's happening here, we can see how it can be mapped on to the nitty-gritty context of a game. For the final section, I'm going to present you what this game is generally about. In that way, with all of these emotional beats that we've hit, all of these narrative and emotional ideas, how the composer is using the instruments to take you along, hopefully with this context, you'll then be able to understand why a composer made the decisions that they did to make a song a certain way. So, for many of you, you probably already know what this game is about, so you can probably extrapolate what's going on. But even if you have, I would encourage you to reflect again on what the beginning of this game is like, okay? For those who don't know, this is a game about 8 different stories. These stories vary widely from one another. From the mundane hopes of a young girl to become a merchant in order to impress her father, to a scholar who's been wrongly accused of something and now looks to find ancient magic secrets on his own now that he's rogue, to an old warrior who's dealing with the grief of betrayal but still trying to find a place for his valor to be of use in the world. There are so many different characters that are being reflected here, but in this one moment at the beginning of the game, what you see is that all 8 of them are lining up in this emotional frequency of, I don't know if I can do this, but I have to go on this adventure. And so as they join together, part of that building of the impact they're having around them is actually all of those characters being added together as the game goes on. So a part of that movement that we talked about that started to grow in their adventurous exploration was actually not only the adding of those people in the party in the game, but the impact that they're having on one another, right? That is what the composer wanted to communicate. So now that we have all of the emotional beats, all of the narrative beats, and we understand the context of the story, we can start to see a little bit of why the composer did what they did. We are now ready to listen to the song one last time. you enjoyed the music that you listened to today, I highly recommend that you check the soundtrack out on Spotify and also check out playing the game as well. So I just want to show you why this music is good. And if we can support them in them making good music, then I would absolutely love to be a part of that. So let's make that happen. Don't feel pressured if you can't, just putting it out there. If you guys like this video, it makes me super, super happy. I really hope that it brought some value to you. And I'm really excited to do more of these. At any rate, I hope that the rest of the day treats you well, that you're able to understand music a little bit better, and I look forward to seeing you next time. All right, take care.